Thank you everyone for coming to these. These are really put on for you to gain, insight into what we're working on, and we want to make sure that any questions you have, we can answer them. So if you do have questions, by all means, put them in the chat, and we'll get to them towards the back half of this conversation. And so, without further ado, I think we want to dive into what have we been working on. What can we tell you that's new? So maybe I can pass the mic over to Chris, and you can just give a little update on development progress and what you've been working on.
Yeah. The development update is I think somewhat mundane right now. It is very, I think, well defined what needs to be completed. We are not running into technical blockers anymore. We're not running into sort of intractable problems that are difficult to solve and take a long time to sort of think through. Like that work is by and large all completed. And so at this point we're just churning through hooking up of contracts within the UI. We have all of this right now on a staging, on sort of our own staging network on Gurley that I think we have running at like 10x speed just to make it easier to test things. But those hookups are going quite well. Again, like there's few bows to tie off on a few of the contracts, but they are very, very near completion, with the last ones being the specifically the accept event system, which is the system we use to accept random events or accept a specific choice on a random event. So we're really getting right there to the end on contracts. The hooking up of the UI to those contracts is going well. From a externalities perspective, we haven't really identified any other technical blockers except for waiting on 4844, as you are all, I'm sure, aware of already. One announcement that did come over the last week is that StarkNet finally announced that they are spinning up the Sepolia testnet, which is may have mentioned before, but I'm making sure to tell you all now that the testnet pre-release will be on Sepolia. So it's great that got started yesterday. I'm not sure if it is available to the public yet or if they've given information about where it is, but they began setting that up yesterday. And so we'll be coordinating with our partners, including Argent and Bravos, and making sure that those wallets are ready to go on Sepolia. The Kubo, which is going to be sort of our initial AMM of choice to handle Sway. On the topic of Sway, another exciting update there is that the Sway bridging is complete and tested. So that process is in place. I actually quite like our bridge because, unlike some others, which I found a little bit surprising, it does support cancellation. So you won't end up in a situation where you're bridging from L1 and L2 and something goes wrong and suddenly your Sway is stuck. That's the same for the NFTs, the asteroids, the crewmates, and soon the ships and crew. They're all cancelable. So pretty excited for that. The Sway bridge will also be integrated into Startgate, into the UI, which is sort of like the StarkNet canonical bridge source that trusted, not in a centralized way, but it is the most trusted place to go to bridge your tokens. So lots and lots of progress there. I'm excited. I know that things have gone slower than we all would like. Some of that is us. Some of that is the misjudging in timelines of our dependencies. Something that we're, I think, always trying to do better about. But I think I'm excited that we are matching in the end the timeline of the underlying technology with a vision for influence which has expanded some over this couple of years as these timelines have pushed out. And I think it's a vision that's going to be really, really exciting and a lot of fun to play. So I'm really excited to get it all into your hands as soon as possible with pre-release.
Thanks for the update, Chris. Just summary. We're still dependent on EIP 4844. Ikubo, I'm not sure how to say it. Is what we're going to be using for that sway. The sway bridge has been tested and progress is going smoothly. So, without further ado, I want to move on to Proto here. I think he's got some very exciting updates to give around balancing and what he's been working on. So I'll let him go ahead and do that.
Sure. So just as a review, past several months have been for me focused on basically figuring out what the asteroid spectral type abundances should be, such that the spectral types are all roughly or as close as we can get them balanced. Meaning that no spectral type is necessarily like better in any absolute sense than any other spectral type. That's sort of the underlying goal there. And so the approach that I've been taking, which I think I've gone over a few times in the past, but just to review again, is basically to figure out what the demands for all the raw materials will be, sort of in a equilibrium sense for the economy, like how much of each of those raw materials will be needed, and then to sort of find an abundance set of abundances for those spectral types that will map to those demands. And what that basically means is that if the belt were ever to be fully built out, and all the asteroids were using, doing approximately the same amount of mining each, that would mean that they were each able to extract the same amount per square kilometer as any other spectral type, which is sort of that balanced condition that we're shooting for. And so to go into what I've sort of been, the progress I've been making on that, one thing that was a good advance this past few weeks, I was able to complete the sort of initial pass of the modeling of the economy that gives a sense of like the relative sort of time costs of each of the different products in the game. So all those 239 products, basically, what are the most common ways to get that product? What are the sort of most common upstream processes that produce that product? Um, I've been able to map basically the sort of shares of each of those upstream processes that produce those products, and taking that all the way down to the beginning, that actually gives an average time cost for all those products. And that's been a pretty informative process. That's actually feeding also directly into a little bit of rebalancing here and there that I'm doing to the production chains themselves to make sure that certain products are not like way more expensive or way less expensive than we're intending them to be. And one area that's definitely going to change as a result of that is the cost of the buildings and chips, like sort of the numbers of especially the modules that are going into those are a little too high at the moment, so those are getting balanced downwards. But so once I have that model of the economy in hand, what I can then do is actually take a set of estimated demands for the raw finished goods in the belt. So when I say finished goods, I mean chips, I mean buildings, food, propellant, and core drills. Those are sort of the products in the game that don't really have like other things you can make from them, but they are used for game mechanics in the game. So those are sort of the endpoints of the production chains. And so basically you can take an estimated requirement or demand for those and feed them backwards through the modeled economy to produce in the end like a set of raw materials that in a steady state economy could produce that many of the finished goods each day in sort of the daily demands. And then what that gives you then is the ratios of all those different raw materials that will be demanded in the belt, and that can be passed into code that I've created to sort of calculate those abundances that will match up with those demands for the raw materials, and then that gives the special type of abundances that I'm looking for. And so currently the step that I'm working on right now is that sort of feeding the estimated finished goods demands backwards through the belt through the economy model. And there's some really interesting interesting things to work on there, especially around how with secondary outputs, loops are very possible and happen a lot in the production chains, where something can be made from something else that can actually be made from the first thing, or more advanced versions of that. So there's some pretty interesting implications there that I'm working through, but I'm pretty close to being able to connect those dots and go from the finished goods demands to those raw materials demands. And one thing that I think you all will probably be a little bit interested in is that I can actually share some of those numbers for the estimated finished goods demands. I think you'll be kind of interested to hear those. So again, this is daily, like real life days, every real life day. And for a certain set of assumptions, which I think I'll not get into here, except to say that it's for around 10,000 players. But I won't get into the other assumptions there. Um, Basically, the daily demand is estimated at around 1,000 tons of food per day, so 1 million kilograms of food, 1 million units of food per day. 130,000 tons of propellant per day, which is a very large number. Propellant is definitely going to be by far the most popular demanded product in the game, just because of all the shipping and transit that's happening. Around 56,000 core drills per day, so that's all the prospectors out there showing their core samples and the extractors and miners. 26 or so light transports per day, so that's by far the most popular ship is light transport. Maybe around 5 shuttles per day, and then a little under 2 heavy transports per day. So, the entire belt, again, producing with this sort of estimate of the number of players around launch, would only be producing around less than 2 heavy transports per day. And then for buildings, we're looking at like 150 warehouses daily, around 75 extractors, around 33 refineries, 7 bioreactors, 17 factories, 10 shipyards, 10 spaceports, 12 marketplaces, and around 5 habitats per day. So these are, again, all complete estimates, like based on a certain set of assumptions that I've made. But together, they sort of give you a picture of like the amount of infrastructure and consumable goods that the belt as a whole will be consuming, sort of at around launch time. Um, and you might be wondering, well, what does it mean to consume a bioreactor? What does it mean to consume a factory? And basically, what that means is that the belt is a certain size. The player base is a certain size. We have a certain number of players in the game, and that player base is growing. So if the player base is at a steady state where they have all the infrastructure they need to be building the belt, then obviously like you wouldn't need any more buildings. Like it's just steady. But if it's growing such that you're adding more players and they need more infrastructure for those new players, then you can actually work out what those daily requirements are to achieve a certain growth rate. So this is estimating, a fairly aggressive growth rate of around, doubling the player base in around 3 months. And we'll see if that actually winds up happening or not. But that sort of feeds directly into these daily estimates. So again, those numbers that I just shared, those are the sort of the endpoint of the estimates that I'm working on to produce the required raw materials, which then feed into the abundances. So hopefully we'll have some numbers for you soon around the abundances. I know Natrax, you're eager to eager to get that number for C types especially, but we'll have those numbers for you soon, and you'll be able to take a look at them. And again, just a as should always be said, everything is not final until launch. So we're working on numbers. They'll be updated as we do pre-release and testing and everything. But that's where we are right now.
Thanks, Proto. Really exciting. And all those numbers he listed, I'll try and get in writing with the note that these are obviously estimates and balancing is still ongoing. That way you guys can all take them and have fun with them. So without lingering on this one much longer here, we are going to pass it over to Sergey. Before we kind of let him dive into what he's going to be sharing today, I just want to preface that what he is sharing today is going to be something that has been a big promise to you guys. Is like, we're trying to make this game approachable to a larger audience. And through the feedback that we got with limited release and, our promise for trying to get this game as approachable as possible, this is kind of leading into what Sergey's been working on here this week, and really excited to share it. I think all of you guys are going to be really, really happy with it, but I will not talk about it. I'll let Sergey do that with his share. So go ahead and take it away, Sergey.
Cool. Cheers. Thanks, JP. And yeah, indeed, I want to dive in. I'm going to show you guys some UI mocks, but before I do that, I want to kind of set the scene, and I want to talk about tutorials, or in our case, the lack of a tutorial. Tutorials are something that most games have, and they've kind of evolved over the years. There's been this word of the new player experience that's been drifting around it, but for the most part, a tutorial has been teaching you how to click the things to get started in your game. And I've worked on a couple of these now. Most notoriously, I was helping EVE Online when they were overhauling their tutorial. And EVE shares a lot of the same kind of interesting challenges that Influence does, but I think Influence takes these even more to the nth degree, because when you're talking about a tutorial for a game that is both extensive and complex as our game, and also a total creative sandbox where you have a ton of different things that you can do at once in our game, and you can pretty much do them all in any order you want, whenever you want. So it's really hard for us to kind of set people on both set people on a path and tell you like, oh hey, we're gonna drop you into this kind of like stage and like hand walk you through this recommended path of things we think a new player should do to get started in the game. It's both hard to really figure out what those things are, like what is the recommended path, because depending on how you got into the game, whether you're joining through an alliance, what you're into, you could have very different recommended paths. And also compounded by the fact that we're a tiny 7-person dev team, and traditional tutorials also suck up a pretty good amount of development resources, because you have to come up with this complex system of listeners, and you're just basically like waiting and listening for people like, hey, have you done this specific action in the UI? If yes, then proceed to the next step, and then et cetera, et cetera. We handhold you all the way until you kind of like graduate, which may still be an ambition for us at the time, but we were thinking about both what can we do right now, right before launch, with the resources that we have available, and given these new, these kind of existing things that we know about Influence, that it is a giant sandbox with a lot of different things to do. And so we settled on what I think is a pretty cool and novel experience, and we're gonna call it. We're calling it the Game Tour, I guess, and that is it's a working title. But what we decided on doing was basically it's the tour bus version of Influence. This isn't going to tell you what you need to do to get started. This isn't going to help you play the game. This isn't going to help you, build your first building or whatever. What it's going to do in as few clicks as possible is take you on a tour, and it's going to whisk you across the belt, across the most exciting, interesting parts of our entire experience. And then it's going to drop you off at a habitat, and it's going to say, hey, this is, we're here at the habitat. From here, you can go on and forge your own journey. The next step to begin your first steps in the game is to create a crew. And afterwards, we're going to hope that, folks can feel comfortable creating a crew or going to the Discord, and from there get the actual tutorialized steps from community members or somebody else that are willing to actually help them take their first steps in the game. But to get people who have like no idea what Influence is, sort of excited about our product from within the product itself, it's kind of a new concept. But I think it's pretty cool, and so we set about designing what do we think the steps of the game tour are, and I'm about to walk you guys through them. There's one more thing I got to mention before this too, is that this is also both the tutorial, and it comes on the back of some very specific feedback we got after we did the limited release, and that was that we start our game, we have our opening splash screen, and there's this giant button that says Explore, and it's a big button, it's blinking at you. Of course, a lot of people who first came into the client clicked this Explore button, and then they were completely lost, because Explore, it sounds really cool and evocative, but it's far from a very direct message, which Explore really means enter the client without logging in, but we condensed that into one word. But I can see where Explore could have been a little vague, and people clicked this Explore button, and then bam, they were just like in the belt, and they didn't know what to do next. So this is also hopefully a vision of what we're going to do on release that's going to help people figure out what to do next beyond that first explore button. I am hopping in the screen share, and let me know if you guys see what I'm sharing. This is going to be an interactive prototype, by the way. This is not in the client, but this is our plan for the game tour. So this is going to be, you know, a new player logging into the game for the first time. Is going to come to this screen. It's the same thing as the Explore screen, but we've also added this login button. But we're assuming that new players are going to come in, and the button that's the call to action state is going to be the one that beckons to them. But of course, logging in and creating an account could be done at any point. It could be done at this menu, and it can be done in the game through that upper left corner here. But once players for the first time hit Explore, if you're a brand new player, you know, we wanted to do the click by click prototype. So you're going to be treated to this opening cinematic. You're going to get all the cool movie. You're going to see the history of Adalia, and I'm about to click through this because we've all seen this cinematic, or those of you guys are probably listening have all seen this thing, but it's a cool thing. And so this is after the cinematic. You are now going to be greeted with this opening, and this is the opening of the game tour. So you're going to be in the belt view. Adalia Prime is going to be selected, and there is going to be the High Commander here, and the High Commander of the High Counselor is going to be welcoming you to the Game of Influence. This is the welcome tour bar. It's up in the upper left of the HUD, and it's going to tell you, oh hey, there are 7 steps to this welcome tour. The steps themselves can be completed in any order you want, so you can skip back, skip forward if you want. But the typical step is going to be this big next button that we assume most players are going to go step by step. And so yeah, this is going to be the new Explore kind of experience. Here you can see that you are not logged in because I just hit Explore. I didn't log into the account, but it's not preventing you. I can log in right now, and if I don't have an account, you know, you're going to be greeted with the same screen. I can create an account, and then I can go here, and then bam, suddenly I'm still in the Explore tour, but now I'm logged into Influence. I just don't have any crewmates. So I haven't. Again, we're going to allow people to step through sequentially. Step 1 is just create an account, which means create a wallet. Now you have a wallet. You don't have any assets or anything like that in the game. So now that login button is replaced with start crew. And again, you can start crew at any point during the tour. You do not have to complete the tour. This is totally all, it's super fluid and at your own pace. So the commander is going to explain about the belt, about Adalia Prime, about the 5 planets, about well, people already have some of the background behind the colony ship and stuff like that. But we're going to be also ironing out whatever this blurb. We don't want it to be too lengthy, but we have a lot of flexibility on our hands regarding exactly which points we want to highlight. But keep in mind, all of this is a UI window that's just floating in front of the regular game client. So at any point, this isn't like you're not locked in to this view. You don't have to. Next is not the only button you can click. This is again the same place you were before. The entire game client is at your fingertips. You just now have this window here that's sort of basically a helpful face that helps walk you through if you are completely brand new, have no idea what Influence is all about. And you can exit out at any point. This is the equivalent of quit the tutorial kind of a thing. But this is skip the game tour. Moving on, so the High Commander, you're going to listen to her talk about the belt view. You're you're going to go to the next section, and the next section shows another one of the High Council members, the provost in this case. This is going to zoom you to a random asteroid in the belt, and it's going to tell you all these asteroids are different. They have all these spectral types. They have all the orbital dynamics. So this is going to walk you through asteroid view, and here you can spin around the asteroid. You can check it out, zoom in on it. But he's going to welcome you to asteroid view. You can go to the next section. And there's going to be the chief navigator of the Arvad explaining space travel. And this is another super cool, we think, part of the game that's going to get people excited. And she's going to tell you, she's going to encourage you, briefly to click the pork chop plot and check it out. Like you can plan routes, and it's just going to do a random asteroid. I think any random asteroid in the belt and Adalia Prime. Just going to pick one at random. Give you a plot for that. Well, actually, she probably can't pick one at random because there will be some asteroids that literally have 0 connections to Adalia Prime. So we're going to have to pick a subset of asteroids that can connect correctly and allow people to like click on routes. But she's going to explain that, hey, ship travel is like super important and the planning of it needs to be done carefully. And this is a really cool part of the game. But people will be able to explore this part immediately on their own through this section of the game tour. The next section of the game tour bounces you to an extractor, and this will be a real extractor. We're going to pick one lot on Adalia Prime that contains an extractor. It's probably going to be one of the starting city extractors, like on Adalia Prime, or something like that. But the point is, it doesn't matter which extractor it is. It's just that this is a real place in the world on Adalia Prime, and then this this guy's going to tell you about like, hey, asteroid ore is like basically the root of the whole asteroid economy. It all starts with the extracted raw materials. There are these types of materials that can be picked for extraction. Bouncing you to the next stage, which is warehousing, which is going to be the chief logistics guy who explains to you all about like, okay, after you've extracted the ore, this is why warehouse networks are important. This is why like storage of raw goods, materials is like super key to the economy. You'll notice, by the way, that the order in which these things are set up are they are loosely mimicking a new player loop. While we don't want to like exactly tell people there's a certain specific way you should start playing this game, but we have a rough new player loop in mind, and that rough new player loop is based on the contents of the starter packs, and they get you to build an extractor, build a warehouse, take your extracted warehoused goods to a marketplace, and then rinse and repeat. And that is the whole core basis of the loop, and from there the whole rest of the game opens up. But this is why we're doing it in this order. So so he's going to walk you through a warehousing and why it's important. Then we'll continue the next section where you have the entertainment director who is going to be this is going to bounce to a marketplace on Adalia Prime, and he's going to walk you through why markets are like super important and how players pool their resources. And this is where you take your goods from the warehouse, to a marketplace to sell them or buy new stuff here. He's going to explain markets to you. And then it's going to end on the 7th and final section, which it's going to bounce you to a habitat. And here we have the chief bio officer of the Arvad, and she's going to tell you all about habitats, how they, a little bit of lore probably about how they do their own artificial gravity. And this is the place where Adalians live. And this is basically the final stop of the tour. So there's 7 stages right now, 7 clicks. We think it hits some pretty good notes. And at the very end of the tour, you have this green recruiting button, which is the same button that you would recruit immediately from here. And basically, this is at that stage where if you have not, I'm going to bounce back to a version of this where you have not logged in, but it's kind of cool because you'll see right here. So if if you are a brand new player and you have not logged in yet, hitting recruit is going to ask you at this step to log in, enter your email, and we think that this is enough. This 7-stage tour is going to be a pretty neat way and a relatively easy way to like ease people into this step, which is, okay, I want to play the game now. I've seen enough of it, a little bit of an extended in-client kind of preview. And if you haven't done your research already, this will hopefully get you to the point where you feel comfortable. Oh, hey, you click the button to recruit a new crewmate. Well, this is where we ask you to log in. You continue with your account, and then you're on your way. Then you're already into the crewmate creation story from here. And so this is replacing the existing flow right now, where basically there's only the login button right here, which puts you into that flow, and puts the tour right in here. That's it. That's it for this stage of the tour. Yeah, happy to answer questions and move on from here.
Thanks, Sergey. I am. Oh, I couldn't be more excited about the tour. To be perfectly honest.
Got any questions?
Hey, can you?
Agree, maybe it was.
There is a lot.
Didn't.
Let's see here. Looking at questions. Will there be an intro to the production chains in the tour?
No. We thought about that. Production chains are quite, they're definitely a big part of influence, but that's one of the things that didn't make the cut. We thought, as few steps as are needed to introduce people to influence does not require knowing how to run refining and production. I know there's a lot of people out there for whom that stuff does sound pretty awesome and appealing. But instead we kind of focused of the two buildings. We have an extractor building, we have the warehousing building, and then we have the market, which completes the full loop. We didn't kind of include the refining and production processes in that stage.
Yeah, and I will also note we are still planning on doing a tutorial series of videos. It's just not the in-game tutorial that's going to be showing that. And again, what we're showing is a game tour rather than a tutorial. But yeah, Logris, welcome up. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
So I think you already answered one of the questions I was going to ask, which is what are you going to do for all the more complicated systems, from refining to science to combat, battle, right? All those things. Are those going to be an expanded version of this that you would unlock later? Like the first time you acquire a ship, then more tutorials pop up about this, or the first time that you're set to engage with another player's ship, so like rendezvous at the same point, then some tutorials would pop up on or options would pop up that say, here's how combat would work, or whatever. Like, are you planning on expanding the system to cover all the subsystems in the game as the primary way to teach players about it? Or is the plan still to go out to wikis and to community resources external to the game for that type of education?
Yeah, I mean,
I think the best way to look at this. Yeah, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
So I was just going to say, I think the best way to look at the game tour is as more of sort of a friendly entry point to the game for a new player who just doesn't know what they're looking at. Somebody clicks an ad and they show up in our browser. Like, these are brand new people right off the ship. Like they're completely, they don't know what the game is, and so we're sort of giving them an idea of what the game is, just a taster of it, and then leading them into the next step, which is to create an account and get their first crewmate and all that. I think for tutorials specifically, which is what your question is getting at, I think we have some considerably more useful, helpful tutorial ideas in mind that we will look at after exploitation launch, because obviously there's a lot to teach about this game that could best be done in game potentially. Like obviously, we'll have a lot of video tutorials that will be available before our exploitation launch that anybody could go watch and get a sense of how to play. But I think the in-game tutorials, would be a much more complicated system, and obviously we'll be, as soon as we've implemented that, we would drop in new components to that as we added the conflict or research from discovery and all that. So overall, I think you can expect a much more comprehensive tutorial system later on. But for now, this is just sort of part of the funnel for new players. This game's work.
Right. Everything. I'll just add to that everything is a resource balance, and yeah, these types of tutorials, especially for the uber complex games, again, they take up, in my experience, a non-insignificant amount of dev resources. You have to listen for everything in the client. You got to do all this custom UI stuff. They are kind of for mid mid-sized dev teams to really tackle. But I will also tack onto that kind of just trends and tutorials that I've seen happening over the years, and this idea with the explosion of both wikis and YouTube. It is not uncommon now. I've seen, like, in the generalized like kind of tutorial era of games, I keep seeing them go down in complexity because people realize, hey, if I want to learn about this very specific part of the game, the easiest way to gain that knowledge is to go type it into into a search box, to go to YouTube, type in how do you do blank in Influence, and you have this awesome like walkthrough of somebody who's spent a lot of their time crafting this awesome tutorial video for anything, and thus leveraging the community content. And so then when you have kind of two things fighting for, you have your in-game official dev tutorial and then all these other third-party tutorials fighting for the same share of attention from new players, I guess it just makes sense to leverage the community content wherever we want. Or wherever we can.
Sure. My next comment is on the login process. I mean that you're already assuming that the user has an Argent wallet, that wallet has gas, they understand like how signatures work. Like there's a lot of sort of crypto native stuff that we take for granted. That would be a huge barrier to entry if you just kind of like dropped Influence into the Epic's game store or something like Illuvium just did, right?
Right.
And I've been to the Argent documentation. I've spent like 2 or 3 hours going through looking for specific answers to things. It is not easy or fun. So I think in terms of polish for a new player experience, when you have all this stuff about our game, but before you can even take an action, before you can even log in, there's things you need to know about, how you're going to control the state of your account basically, and how you're going to secure those things. And that's not something that is applicable to most traditional games that you're going to come across, right? Like World of Warcraft doesn't have to describe to you what a login system is, right? In the same way that you have to understand what a key phrase is in a signature, right? And what a session signature is, et cetera, for Influence, right? It's just a whole extra bag of complexity that most games don't have to tackle.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, it looks like maybe you want to step in here, or I'm happy to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that, and it's a good point. It's been one of the one of our biggest focuses for UX is how to overcome that challenge. And I think that certainly sending new users that are not familiar with wallets directly into like Argent or Bravos, any extension wallet really is going to be a huge have quite a good startup experience. You're not having to take care of seeds. You're just logging in with your email. You get a account abstracted wallet or account right out of the gate that has a Guardian installed with Argent, which I think is great. And on top of that, we're also working with Argent specifically on being able to sign and validate messages prior to account deploy, as well as then working to integrate ramp. It could be any on-ramp, but specifically ramp in our case, so that we can end up with an experience where you are using a credit card, signing a message that looks a lot like a Google OAuth sort of experience, where they're asking you for permission to use your account to access Influence. You can obviously expand the window and see kind of all the details of that. But then you get to a point where you've already signed the session key, or sorry, the session signature has already been signed. You've already funded your account. basically we're just sitting there and the client's waiting for the Ether or Starks or Sway to hit your account, see that, and then get you started. So I mean, there's definitely still a little friction there, but I think we can see a path to it being very close to a Web 2 login experience. And then you have other wallets like Commissar's product cartridge that we've used before, and I think we'll see a proliferation of these kind of you know non non-seed word wallets. You know, they're not extensions; they're in web. They're a lot more familiar to Web2 users that have approached, you know, logging in with everything via Google or Twitter or Facebook, etc. So I think it's definitely a good point, but it's one that we're taking quite seriously, and we've put a lot of work in, you know, both on our own as well as with our partners to try to overcome.
I'll even, if I may, add even one more point because I was thinking too, like, yeah, yes, there's friction there, and it's absolutely not insignificant. But back to a conversation I was having with Chris, like way back in the day too, about this kind of taking a higher level view of things. The friction with onboarding people who are not crypto native into the crypto native ecosystem is always going to exist, but it's also kind of like a last mile problem. And some of the more interesting parts that can get people past that are in the very beginning, which are, one, is this a cool game? Do I want to play it? It's fascinating how you can see how games that are like really opaque, that are not even crypto native games, but like games like Dwarf Fort or like Eve Online, like super complex things. If they excite people enough, you'd be surprised the types of hurdles that people will be willing to hop through to get into those games. And at the core, this is what we want to focus on for influence. We know there will probably be a handful of people who are like, oh, I would play this game except all the blockchain nonsense, you know, and a handful of those people will bounce out. But more importantly, I think if the game is cool enough and if it's compelling enough and you can bounce around the belt and just see everything this game has to offer, you will be willing to then, you know, put yourself through those hurdles of figuring out wallets, going to the community, asking what you need to do, all that other stuff to kind of get yourself over that hump. That's the hope, at least. I think that's the vision too, is to make a game that's so cool that people will figure out some of this stuff, which is understandably still a little clunky around blockchain right now.
Yeah, I mean, the Origin experience is even more clunky than your average L2, right? You know, there's a different address you have. You basically, I haven't found a way of having a Ledger secured Argent account yet. There's things that have stopped me from using your web client, and even just to help test your game, give you feedback on it. And I think I'm obviously not your traditional Web2 gamer that's never heard of blockchain before. I'm coming from the extreme other end of the spectrum, and I'm finding it frustrating. I'm just wondering what you could do inside the Influence clients, Influence resources, in order to make that transition clearer, in order to offer whatever assistance. Because otherwise, I looked at all the different ways of Argent wallets and spent like 3 hours talking through documentation, trying to find like if there was how this is going to get back to me and hurt me in some way. And like, yeah, that's not a usual crypto story, but it was certainly mine. It was a frustrating one.
Yeah, I'd like to. I definitely want to give some context here. I think, Logos, you're probably
yeah,
on.
It is, again, bears repeating that there's kind of three different things in play here. There's Argent X, and there's Argent Web Wallet. The vast majority of our new players, and that's the really sort of simple experience to, you know, just put in your email address and you're sort of good to go. Argent X has been the one that has been Darknet specific Argent wallet that a lot of our users have used in the past. And Argent, of course, is the one that was originally an Ethereum layer 1 wallet that is now moving to being Starknet native. I don't know what the current state of Argent itself is right now. I haven't actually tried it on Starknet recently, but you know, I think obviously they'll be looking to converge that to the user experience for Argent X, which is, I think, pretty clean for Argent X for most of us who've used it.
Yeah, I think also, Logris, I just want to maybe emphasize this is like you're so far on the spectrum of blockchain, and I've actually started to see that this is like an not an issue, but an interesting phenomena where us who have been in Web3 for so long are now scared of like things that seem easy and like using an email address and now we're like, wait, where's the private key, where's the security, where's all these things, and it's like I get it, but I think all of us in Web3 just need to like actually just embrace maybe some of these UX features that are so much better, and I without sacrificing security, obviously, but like I had my dad, who is 68 years old, try limited release just to make an account so I could see like someone who is not a gamer, who's old, who has like no knowledge of any of this. And he was like, oh, I just like put in my email with Argent and like type in this code, and he got it. And like, yeah, he had a couple of questions, but like if he can get it, I think we're good.
Yeah, thankfully the security is a gradient, right? If all you need is to enter your email address, and that's the thing. I mean, but I agree. It's like a pincer. To have the best, most fluid on ramp. I think we need like it's like a pincer maneuver, and the two sides of the pincer are have a game that's awesome and exciting enough for people to whatever do the thing, overcome the necessary challenges to get in there and start playing. And the second thing is have those challenges be as smooth as possible so that they're not annoying enough to get people to bounce off. And with yeah, that which is to say that's the ideal. So you can attack it from both sides, from the technical side and from the kind of pure evocative game design, like show you cool visuals in front of your face side.
Okay. Well, thank you for your commentary, guys. That's all I have to say. I'll leave the stage.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks for asking.
Thanks.
I mean, it is important.
Well, I was going to add that it sort of sounds like a sort of like a blockchain horseshoe theory, but I think that there are also some features you may or may not be familiar with already that we've built into Influence that kind of address this security issue. They even, I think, in a lot of ways make up for the current lack of ledger storage, which is a work in progress and will be coming. Not from us, but from StarkNet Foundation's work with Ledger. So we have a lot of systems, especially around the NFTs, where you can take them, your asteroid crew, these important assets, move them back to L1 and keep them there. They can be on a hardware wallet if they need to be. But because you've delegated the control of them to a, I guess call it like an L2 hot wallet that plays the game, you can still use them. And so you get to use them while they sit secure on L1. You can even do that if you want to do it just on L2. You can have them in a different address on L2 and be playing with a like game hot wallet. So I think that we've built in a lot of options there that should allow for some, I think, quite secure setups. But I agree, having hardware support on L2 and in general, just always a better wallet experience is a huge goal, and it's something that we talk a lot with the Argent team, with the Bravos team, Cartridge team, etc. And so that's always something that we're trying to push forward.
One comment I want to make, just from questions and comments I'm seeing in the chat, is that Cartridge was called out, and like losing that made it so that maybe we have less of an easy time having UX be solved, because they had sessions and things like that back on one of our test nets. Argent will have that. That'll be coming at exploitation. You'll be able to use sessions all within Argent web wallet. So that's going to be a huge increase in I think experience, because you can use an email and then you just sign a message and you're playing the game. There's no multiple confirmations that are coming through. But not to dwell on security and onboarding for too long. If we have other questions that pertain to anything we've shared today, or just general game questions, we do have about 10 more minutes that we can be on this call.
Mm-hmm. I'll take questions. I'll also take any thoughts on, I guess this whole game tour thing, which is, I thought it was a pretty good solution given the constraints we had to work with, but I was also like, every time when I was looking at this, I couldn't exactly think of any games that did something similar. So I'll take any thoughts that you guys have on, like, is there any other games that had this, not a tutorial, again, I don't want to mix it up as something that teaches you how to play step by step and tells you which buttons to click. It is an in-game tour of some of the coolest, we think, and most relevant parts of the game. Do you guys think that concept is like appealing and will actually work for this type of game you play in your browser going forward?
I have a few comments coming in, but Juice says, "Yeah, I think it's good." Um, I mean, I think as the team's already expressed, we we like the idea here. Yeah, we're getting other people say they're enjoying the preview so far. So I think we might have to adjust certain things, Sergey, dependent on what we see in pre-release. But I think that's the exciting part about pre-release, is that we really get to test fire all of this.
Mm-hmm. Did anybody else? Here's another question, because we received some, part of the things that got us along on this track was that people didn't know what happened after they clicked the Explore button. What do you guys think of the current button? If you're not logged in, the button doesn't say play, it says Explore. What do you guys think of how that feels, both from the perspective of you as an existing user, and maybe put yourself in the shoes of someone who hasn't heard of Influence, is just arriving at the client, or they will be when the game first launches? Yeah, I see Commissar saying Explore as guest. Yeah, I also thought of varying levels of specificity. Explore, it does seem pretty evocative, but it is also maybe a little bit vague and unspecific. Yeah, you can't play yet. Yep, exactly. Everything is exploring, even when you're logged in with your crew.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting to think about, like, small language changes make big impact sometimes, and explore is a cool word, and I think we all enjoy it, but does it need to change to make it more obvious to people? Maybe?
I was reminded of, before we did this version of the UI, the button was called Launch, or Launch Full Screen. It wasn't even play. But that was the only way into the game back in the day. Just launch.
I see multiple people are typing, so we're probably going to get our answer here in a second. We're also getting additional comments on kind of the experience that you showcased. But yeah, I'm seeing Board Certified said maybe start with a scene of the marketplace trading UI, showing numbers moving of materials and products might elicit further curiosity.
Yeah, actually, that's a great point, and I was considering that. Still not ruled out, but we have a asteroid-wide market screen, and the idea is, like, before you get into any specific market on the surface, you're going to see, like, Adalian Prime markets, and it's going to show you the top most traded commodities with this sort of stock ticker overview, and we could just pop that screen up, while you have the entertainment director talking about markets and stuff like that. So that is, I agree. It's all about sort of what things are going to cause the most impact, what things are going to generate interest for people, because you're on a tour, right? You're trying to be a good tour guide and explain the most exciting parts of the thing you're touring.
Yeah, I think the idea of showing a marketplace might be interesting. I mean, that's a huge part of this game that is not currently focused on in that tour. But I think for now, we'll leave it to you, Sergey, to decide on that.
Yeah, it's gonna be cool. Also, so yeah, the Explorer. Let me just pop into screen share again. I'll show it so you guys can follow along and just put yourself in the shoes of a new player. Again, I know we're almost up, but like pretend this is sort of the vision for when players, there's going to be a number of ways that you can find out about influence, but this is the main. That video does not loop correctly, but I thought this is that belt spinning in high speed. I thought it was like just a very iconic visual, and it's a cool thing again for someone who's knows nearly nothing about influence or is interested in it to just come and see this beautiful, like kind of hypnotic spinning belt image. But this is going to be it. This is the gateway to the game. You can either log in or explore, but the explore button is right there. And there's a little tutorial. I don't know. It's probably not high res enough to see, but it says explore Adalia as a guest without logging in. When you hover the explore button, it kind of gets into detail as to what's going to happen on the other side of that click. And hopefully this is both an exciting and a kind of worthy landing page for new players that get in. Thanks, Midge. And Commissar, yeah. I think the belt spinning is going to turn some heads right from the very beginning.
Logris. There is no collision currently. I don't think there ever will be either.
Oh man, you're not far from the first person who's asked that.
But maybe he means with ships being exploded too. So when conflict comes out, maybe hot spots will show red on the map. Yeah, those are fun to think about. Well, we're pretty much at time here. So I want to thank everyone for coming. I have all this recorded. The video is recorded as well. I'll get that up on YouTube. I think listening to this one without the video would be a little challenging. So I'll try and get that up here in an hour or so once it's done compressing. And thank you everyone for attending. I think everyone up here, Chris, Sergey, Proto, any last comments, or shall we close it down?
Yeah, thank you everyone.
That was great. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
And I'll
For
try.
Those of you who are celebrating Thanksgiving, happy Thanksgiving, and otherwise we'll talk to you soon.